In this video, we'll explore intermittent fasting through the lens of research shared by Dr. Andrew Huberman and other experts. Two of the most common questions people have are, when is the best time to eat? And how long should the eating window be? Let's delve into what the science says.
The two most common questions about intermittent fasting are, when is the ideal time for the eating window? Is it early in the day, the middle of the day, or later in the day? And how long should that eating window be? Should it be 8 hours? Or should it be 7 hours, or 6 hours, or 12 hours? Turns out that there's some general frameworks that we can follow in order to answer these questions. There are some absolutes within this realm of time-restricted feeding. Here are a couple of absolutes that you would want to consider. First of all, it pays off in the metabolic sense, and in the health sense, and in the weight maintenance or loss sense, to not ingest any food in the first hour after waking. Okay? The second major pillar that's well supported by research is that for the 2 and ideally 3 hours prior to bedtime, you also don't ingest any food, or liquid calories for that matter. So it turns out that the answer to the question, when is it best to eat, is actually best answered by thinking about the other side of the coin, which is, when is it best to fast?
Dr. Huberman emphasizes that the timing of your eating window significantly impacts your metabolic health and overall well-being. For instance, studies published in the journal Cell Metabolism have shown that early time-restricted feeding, where the eating window starts earlier in the day, can improve insulin sensitivity and lower blood pressure. These findings align with Dr. Huberman's recommendation to carefully consider not just how long you eat, but when.
So because we are fasting during sleep, it's very clear that it's best to extend the sleep-related fast either into the morning or to start it in the evening. When we sleep, our body undergoes a number of different processes in the brain and body in order to recover the cells and tissues. Many of you have probably heard of autophagy, which is essentially a cleaning up, a gobbling up of dead cells and cells that are injured or sick. And this is a natural process that occurs, and it occurs mainly during sleep, although not only during sleep.
According to Dr. Huberman, two foundational pillars of intermittent fasting stand out. First, delaying your first meal by at least an hour after waking. This aligns with research from Dr. Satchin Panda, a leading expert on circadian rhythms, who has found that this practice helps regulate blood sugar and optimize metabolic efficiency. Second, avoiding food 2 to 3 hours before bedtime. Dr. Panda's research also highlights that late-night eating disrupts the body's ability to process food efficiently, interfering with sleep-related fasting benefits.
Fasting of any kind does trigger autophagy. So when we're asleep, the bad cells are getting gobbled up and eaten. So you're already fasting when you're asleep, and how deep you are into that fast depends on how long it was since your last meal.
Fasting during sleep activates autophagy, the body's natural cell-cleaning mechanism. Supporting this, a study published in Nature describes how fasting enhances autophagy, leading to improved cellular health and reduced inflammation. Additionally, research from the Journal of Neuroscience has shown that the glymphatic system, responsible for clearing waste from the brain, functions most effectively during sleep in a fasted state. This combination of brain and body recovery highlights the importance of extending the sleep-related fast.
So if you fast early in the day and you've been asleep for 5, 6, 7, 8 hours, I would hope somewhere between 6 and 8 hours for most people is going to be beneficial. When you wake up, I mentioned earlier that you don't want to eat for at least the first 60 minutes after waking, but were you to extend that fasting to say 9 a.m., 10 a.m., 11 a.m., or even 12 noon or later, you are taking advantage of the deep fast that you were in during sleep and certainly toward the end of sleep. When we eat, the clearance of that food from our gut and the processes in our cells and organs that are related to digestion and the utilization of that food takes about 5 to 6 hours. So if you eat a meal and that meal lasts 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or 30 minutes, or even an hour, and then you stop eating, you've stopped eating, but you are not fasting at that point. You can say you're fasting because you're no longer putting food into your digestive tract, but you are not in a fasted state. You are not under conditions of fasting.
Dr. Huberman suggests an eating window of noon to 6 p.m. or 8 p.m. as a practical approach for most people. This aligns with findings from a 2019 study in the New England Journal of Medicine, which showed that time-restricted feeding can lead to significant improvements in weight management, cardiovascular health, and longevity. The authors emphasized that aligning eating windows with circadian rhythms enhances these benefits, making midday to evening feeding particularly effective.
That you want your eating window to be tacked or attached to your sleep-based fasting in a way that makes it easier for you to get into the fasted state for a period of time. So we can view that point from the perspective of best, better, and worst. Okay? So if you are like most people and you sleep at night, you're waking up somewhere around 6:30, 7 a.m., or maybe even 8 a.m., let's say you were to push your fasting window out such that you started eating at noon, and then you stopped eating at 6 p.m. Well, then you're not eating from 6 p.m. until, let's say, your bedtime is 10 p.m., but from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., your body is not yet in a fasted state because you just ate. However, you're starting to taper into a fasted state before sleep, and then all through sleep and until the next morning and late morning, you are actually in a fasted state.
Extending the fast achieved during sleep allows your body to continue repairing and optimizing itself. Research from Dr. Valter Longo, a renowned longevity expert, supports this idea. In his studies on fasting mimicking diets, he found that prolonged fasting periods, like those extending into the morning, trigger a host of health benefits, including improved immune function and reduced risk of chronic diseases. These findings bolster Dr. Huberman's advice to delay breakfast until at least 10 a.m. or even later.
Now, most people find it very hard to only eat in the middle of the day. So while that's best, it's ideal for sake of the fasting-related improvements in health, it is not ideal, and it's not very applicable to most work and family and social situations. Let's imagine a different pattern of eating, where the feeding window starts in the afternoon, starts around 2 or even 3 p.m. Some people don't have much trouble, or they can train themselves to get their feeding window out to 2 or 3 p.m., and then they will eat until 10 or 11 p.m., right? If you do the math, you realize that that feeding window is still pretty short. It still constitutes what we would call intermittent fasting or time-restricted feeding. But assuming that they go to bed around 11 p.m. or midnight, they are not actually fasted in sleep, because for the first 6 hours or so of sleep, maybe 5, but probably more like 6 hours of sleep, they're still digesting the food that they consumed late in the night. It does appear beneficial to grab a hold of that sleep-related fast. There is something special about the fasting that occurs during sleep because it's associated with a number of processes that relate to the so-called lymphatic system, the movement of lymph-like fluids and other fluids through the brain, a kind of sweeping out, garbage disposal, if you will, a clearing out of the metabolic debris and some of the autophagy that's associated with bad processes in the brain. But essentially, during sleep, and in particular during fasted states of sleep, we are undergoing a number of automatic cellular processes that clear out debris from our brain, enhance cognition, or at least offset dementia. This is now well established, as well as a number of the same processes occurring in the organs of our body.
While a strict midday eating window may be ideal for health, it's not always practical. Dr. Huberman acknowledges this, and other researchers like Dr. Krista Varadi, an expert on intermittent fasting, suggest that even a later eating window, such as 2 p.m. to 8 p.m., can yield benefits. However, it's critical to avoid eating too late at night, as digestion can interfere with the restorative processes that occur during sleep.
So from both a practical and a health perspective and a purely objective view of how intermittent fasting works and can benefit us, starting to eat each day somewhere around 10 a.m. or around noon, and then allowing a feeding window that goes until 6 or maybe 8 p.m., that seems to me, at least based on the data and what I understand about typical cultures where people eat in the daytime and in the evening, that seems to me like the kind of schedule that will allow you to get the most out of intermittent fasting, time-restricted feeding, but does not set you up to be really out of sync with the social rhythms in most cultures. If you think about it from the perspective of, say, a noon to 8 feeding window, what you'll find is that you're able to eat lunch with others, if you like, or by yourself. You will be able to eat dinner at a reasonable hour.
Dr. Huberman's insights and supporting research emphasize the importance of aligning your eating and fasting windows with your body's natural rhythms. By delaying your first meal, ending your last meal well before bedtime, and maintaining consistency, you can maximize the benefits of intermittent fasting for your metabolic health, cognitive function, and longevity.